sun and give thanks for today and for all creation. Wabanagi people.
The Penobscot people have a long and rich history with their territorial homelands. They have always lived in harmony with creation.
Penobscot are living on land that we've been living on for, 15,000 years. It's right smack dab in the middle of the Penobscot River, from the ocean up through the mountains and the small lakes and streams. So, through history, though, we've been confined to the islands on the Penobscot River. So at one point that was devastating to us, but in now it seems more of a stronghold. It's actually helped protect who we are.
Barry Dana is a member of the Penobscot Nation at Old Town, Maine. As a former chief, Barry makes it his mission to carry on the message of his people.
I grew up on the Penobscot Reservation, right on the Penobscot River. Very native, very Penobscot, but also holding a high level of responsibility for maintaining, being Penobscot.
He grew up on Indian Island in Maine on the reservation, and he has spent his life pursuing cultural activities, and that's what really drives him in his pursuits. It's following his ancestors' paths.
The Abbey Museum's collections comprise of objects representing 10,000 years of Native American culture and history in Maine.
We have archaeological evidence of Native people living in Maine for 12,000 years, and so we have 4 communities in the state that are federally recognized today: Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, Micmac, and Maliseet, and collectively they're known as the Wabanaki.
Barry Dana is also a very talented artist whose work is well known. Barry Dana's introduction into the world of art was largely influenced by his love of the land and his people.
Birchbark is probably the number one, as the way I like to think about it, number one resource of our people. You take this area at one time was under a mile thick sheet of ice. So nothing obviously was growing then. But when that receded, like today, if you have a fire or you allow a field to come back into woods, first thing that grows is birch. So my thinking is, if that's the case, when our people first lived here, the first tree they would have encountered would have been birch tree. There's hundreds of uses for birch bark. And if you're going to study your own culture, besides language, you got to know how to provide for yourself. And with birch, you create canoes and housing and receptacles, medicines, eye protection in the winter, leggings. I mean, the list is endless.
Barry does some really extraordinary work. He started making birch bark baskets and really taking his art and taking those baskets to a different level, really etching and doing the visual kind of storytelling and paint, things that he'd been doing in paint in that media, then onto the birch bark, which he continues today.
Barry's inspiration for developing his artwork came from his close relationship with the elders.
I was learning ash basketry from an elder, and I liked it. You know, I pound the ash, I gauged it, scraped it, wove a basket, and she says, "There, now you're a basket maker." I said, "Well, okay, that's cool." I got an invitation a couple of years later from the Maine Indian Basket Alliance to show my baskets.
Barry has been working with the Abbey Museum for at least 15 years as a demonstrator and an educator. We have purchased items in the collection from him. He's done workshops on how to make a small birchbark mochac and etch it, weaving it with spruce root.
We've hired him at Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance events and venues to build birchbark canoes at some of our large public Native American festivals, and that's been funded through Maine Arts Commission, as well as wigwams on site on the College of the Atlantic campus where we do our annual festival there in Bar Harbor. And so, I think he's a really extraordinary artist. And his work is, again, so important culturally because very few people are doing that.
I'll gather in the spring when there's still snow on the ground, but the air temperature is in the 50s. The bark warms up, and that's when you get the best etching bark is in the spring. It's when it's called a red cambium. It adheres to the outer bark. So when you take the outer bark off a birch tree, you're leaving the inner bark. That means the tree lives. If it's a good gathering, if I've been lucky that day and I come across enough trees, I could probably gather enough bark in one day in the spring to last me through the next gathering, which is in the fall.
Like many other artists, when Barry works with the raw materials such as birch bark, he feels the connection with his past.
It's not necessarily just doing ceremony, with feathers and things like that. Those are critical, those are important, but for me, I want it to encompass everything that we do in the course of a day, from sunrise to sunset and beyond. In the course of our life, should be considered sacred. So if we're walking a particular way in connection with the earth, that in itself is a ceremony. So whether it's the sweetgrass or the bark itself, to me, it's all sacred. So gathering the bark is as much a ceremony as smudging with an eagle feather. I'm now going to use this awl to draw this pattern. Thing about a traditional basket, nothing has to be perfect. If things are perfect, then they actually become boring. Cutting with a knife, cutting bark, you can't just cut straight. You have to cut on an angle. Bark just won't cut otherwise. Now this bark was gathered just a week or so ago, so it still has real nice freshness in it. My uncle told me, when you cut that line, make sure you cut it right in half. Okay, now there's a pattern. This particular sheet of bark is fairly thick. If this was a larger basket, I'd want to keep all the thickness. But it's a small basket, so I'll generally thin this down. So the white is the inside of the basket. So this side has been attacked by the wind, freezing rain, hot sun, and it becomes brittle. But the inside is protected. So this is the better surface. So you want that to be the outside. So as I thin this down, it'll be easier to fold. Sometimes this comes off in one easy little simple maneuver, and sometimes it's, as it is now, it's just taking its time. The beauty of the crooked knife, it allows me to to work on a flat surface. The crooked knife is made out of metal and wood. Obviously the metal would have been a European influence, but you know, we're pretty adaptive, so we took the European metal and said, I got a good idea for that, and we substituted the beaver teeth. So we took the beaver teeth out of the wood block and then put the knife in. So it's basically a beaver tooth knife. You know, I love making the basket. I don't like getting started sometimes. I'd rather be out doing other things than indoors. But once I get started, sometimes I don't know when to stop. Probably one of the things that excite me the most about working with bark, or whether I'm tanning hides or you know, calling in a moose, is you think about the ancestors. And I think when we do this stuff, when we actually with our hands touch what they touched and do what they did, we actually can tap in through our genetics and get thoughts of what they actually thought.
Barry's a very spiritual person too, and then I also think maybe it depends on you know, how you feel yourself about, you know, your art and your culture and how you were raised. I think when we make our baskets, we talk about, you know, the many hands that have helped us weave. Certainly for those of us practicing these traditional art forms, we always think about the ancestors, I think.
I guess I can say that his activities are very much driven by what comes from his heart culturally. He has a deep care for the Penobscot people and for the ongoing cultural activities, and, you know, making sure that they are ongoing.
Barry's intricate work fascinates many people, including those in the professional world.
My favorite piece is the Three Sisters basket. It's so realistic and so well done. The corn is unbelievable. There's 3 ears of corn kind of tied together up at the top at the husks, and it's just beautifully done. And you can see how much care was taken in etching that. And I'm not an artist, and so I look at a piece like that and just think about the skill and how you would have to kind of plot out where you want to put things. Barry's work is really interesting. It's a little bit different from some of the other birchbark artists. He does less with the kind of more traditional negative birchbark etching that's done, where a picture is etched into the bark and the bark is left dark and the picture is light. Barry actually does the opposite, where he leaves the image dark and etches away the rest of the bark to reveal the lighter summer bark underneath, which is a really, it allows for a very detailed work to come through his basketry.
Now I'm going to put some boiling hot water on it to really soften it up. You can see it wanting to curl already. Basically what I'm doing here, I'm pushing down with my hand, and then with my left hand I'm pulling up on the bark and I'm making a nice fold on the bottom. So these holes that I'm making with these pins, they're going to be where the roots are going to go through to make sure that the roots are what's going to do all the sewing. These are just temporary. There's our basket. What next is to do the lacing with the roots, and also to put a cedar rim around it that'll maintain that nice shape.
Barry created a very special piece to honor people who had an influence on his life.
He did a large piece with a lid, and one face was Gandhi, one face was Chief Joseph, and on a side was Martin Luther King, and the last side was Dalai Lama.
I did one with Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King, and Chief Joseph. 4 directions, 1 vision.
I guess what makes it my favorite was watching the piece be created. It was so amazing to watch the faces come out of the bark.
It puts in front of people this this question, who are we and who should we be and are we living right? Well, these 4 people were trying to live right, but they were persecuted for it, and they should be honored and remembered. I make sure I don't, at this point, I'm careful to watch the root as I pull it close, making sure it doesn't twist. You want to leave the rounded side of the root outside, facing out. Going all the way around to really secure the end here. I'll go through that last hole one more time. So I'm going to start etching, and with a smaller basket like this, there's just so much you can do, but I want to get a sense of kind of its character, and then kind of match that up against what I'm in the mood to do anyway. So if I try to do too much, obviously it's going to be too busy and, well, maybe not quite eye-appealing. If I have no idea what I want to do, I'll start with a circle. That design I like is actually the Earth. So you can kind of see oceans and continents here already, just in the natural stains that nature puts in the bark itself. And then sometimes I think I've drawn it perfectly, and when I start to etch, it comes out different. Because the bark has texture. So if it has texture, it has like little roads in it that end up taking my pencil or etching knife in a different path.
Barry's intricate artwork has museums and other institutions commissioning special projects.
The Hudson Museum is a place where they, I think, take a lot of pride in the fact that they are on Penobscot ancestral land, right there on Penobscot River. And it seems that the people there want to, through a museum mission, is to preserve the past. But they've recognized that we aren't just the past. People who are alive today, we're here because of the past, but we're still viable. We're still people worth celebrating. So they contacted me and they wanted a Birchbark Wigwam right in their museum. And I said, cool.
Well, we built a Birchbark Wigwam right in the museum, and it was really interesting. For the first time, we built a wigwam indoors.
The buzz for this one was to be, to help celebrate the opening of this main Indian gallery here. I think it's great that a contemporary Penobscot artist was asked to build this piece inside.
Not only are the museums taking this stuff as serious and worth knowing about, but so many people are recognizing that, maybe we should pay attention to that type of stuff. Yeah, we're not going to live in a Birchbark Wigwam today, but the values and the lessons that you learn from that, that's what I sensed. A lot of people had one woman practically in tears. She goes, I can't believe you're doing this. This is just amazing. So the only way to etch this winter bark off the basket is to get it wet first before I start etching. And then it's just a matter of taking off what is not your final subject.
Today, Barry continues to do his artwork and school workshops. His work remained an inspiration to many people.
Barry is, I think, a remarkable individual. What I remember most about him when he was our chief was always an advocate for the culture.
I think it drives his desire to pursue the cultural activities because something is telling him that's what you need to be doing.
He, I think, is a really amazing leader for inspiring new generations of children to be able to move into the arts as a career and hopefully keep them in Maine and tied in and connected to Native communities.
Young people who are energetic elders who have the wisdom, bring them in the circle, and make our future bright and perfect again, because it's possible. Sometimes they'll say, well, how do you know when you've finished it? I say, I don't know. It sort of jumps out at you and says, yeah, that's done. So keep looking at it and say, well, I don't know. That conveys the message I was looking for. So, and then it's time to sign the bottom. There. I put my clan, the Dragonfly, my name, and my tribe.